All right, ready to dive into the dream of renting a house in Phuket. And let's get this straight right off the bat. It's Phuket, not Phuket, just so we're all saying it right. Today we're using the Phuket House Rental Guide for 2025, and it's published by, get this, Ocean Worldwide, a luxury real estate agency that's been around Phuket, since 2004.
Wow, 2004, they must know that market inside and out by now.
Right, and we're lucky enough to be tapping into their expertise for this deep dive. Their director, Sandra O'Neill, has helped thousands of families and investors figure out the whole Phuket and Koh Samui property scene. I mean, they really focus on the luxury side of things.
Luxury in Phuket sounds rough, doesn't it?
Okay, so let's break down this rental market. This guide mentions rising prices, which, I mean, isn't a surprise with how popular Phuket is. But what kind of numbers are we actually talking about for different types of places?
Well, apartments, on average, you're looking at about 15,000 to 40,000 Thai baht per month. Houses, though, jump up 30,000 to 80,000 baht. Sometimes even more than that, actually. Then there's the dream, right? Those villas. Think upwards of 80,000 baht. But of course, these are just averages. Locations, size, amenities, all that jazz factors in.
Yeah, those averages are a pretty big range. Sounds like it's key to have a budget in mind before you even start looking. Now, location always a biggie. What area stood out to you?
Patong, no surprise there, still super popular, especially for, well, the nightlife, right, and those beaches. It really seems to draw a lot of younger folks and tourists looking for that party vibe.
Patong definitely screams Phuket nightlife.
Hmm.
But what if someone's after, like a family-friendly vibe, or just something more laid back? Any other spots the guide suggests?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Roy and Shillong, those are popular picks for families, and expats who just want a slower pace. Interestingly, though, Katu's becoming really sought after, mainly because it's central and has things like international schools and golf courses.
Katu. I'm writing that one down. It's like that perfect mix of convenient but still peaceful.
Yeah.
But, okay, vibe aside, what are some of the just practical things people should think about when choosing where to live?
Proximity to the essentials, absolutely.
Yeah.
Supermarkets, hospitals, schools, good public transport, all that. You really want to make daily life as easy as possible.
Makes sense. Safety and a sense of community are so important too, right?
Right.
Feeling at home, not just like a visitor passing through. Does the guide touch on that?
Oh, yeah, it stresses that a lot. Do your research, see what the crime rates are like in different areas, talk to people who live there, already get a feel for the community. It can make all the difference.
Totally. So we've talked market trends and location.
Mm-hmm.
What about just like the essential things renters need to be aware of before they commit to anything? What really stuck out to you from this guide?
Honestly, budgeting. And I mean, realistically, it's easy to get caught up in the Phuket dream, those villas and everything, but there are so many expenses beyond the rent itself.
Right. Those hidden costs you don't always think about up front.
Exactly. Groceries, getting around, entertainment, utilities, it all adds up. Plus, don't forget things like security deposits, maybe even moving expenses if you're coming from far away. That can all really hit the bank account if you're not careful.
It's not just the initial price, it's the whole cost of living there. Right.
It's 100%. Budget, budget, budget. Can't stress that enough.
Got it. Budget wisely, listeners.
Yeah.
Anything else the guide emphasizes?
Reading those lease terms, I know it's boring, but it's crucial. Especially in a different country where the legal stuff might be totally different. Every clause matters.
I learned that the hard way once. Didn't end well. What parts of the lease are especially important to, really pay attention to?
Okay, so how long the lease is, any clauses about ending it early, what you're actually responsible for as a tenant, their pet policy, anything about who handles maintenance, all those things. If anything's unclear, ask. Don't be afraid to get clarification or even talk to a lawyer if you need to.
Good advice. Knowledge is power, especially when it comes to legal stuff. Speaking of costs, what about utilities? Are those usually included in the rent, or is that separate?
It varies. Electricity can get pricey, especially if you're using AC a lot with that tropical heat. Water's usually less, but still something to budget for. It's always a good idea to ask about average utility costs up front. The landlord or the agent should have a decent idea.
Smart thinking. Better to know what you're getting into, right? And of course, internet. It's like a basic need these days.
Oh, totally. Working remotely, streaming, just staying connected. The guide suggests looking into different providers in Phuket. Compare packages, see what speeds are available, all that. Coverage can be spotty in some areas.
Okay, so now for the fun stuff. Types of houses available. This guide covers everything from, those luxury villas to traditional Thai houses.
Mm-hmm.
What are the big differences people should keep in mind when trying to decide what they want?
Villas, those are the ultimate luxury. Private pools, big gardens, incredible views, sometimes even staff. But obviously all that comes with a price tag to match.
Dreamy, but definitely not for everyone's budget. What about condos or apartments? Are those more like middle ground?
Yeah, generally they offer a good balance. Often they're in those complexes with shared amenities like pools, gyms, even shops and restaurants sometimes.
Plus, they're usually in more central spots close to the action. What about those traditional Thai houses? They just sound so charming. What's that experience like?
They're definitely unique. You're really immersed in the local style and culture. Might not have all the modern stuff you'd find in a villa or condo, though. It's about what matters most to you, that modern convenience or the cultural experience.
So many options. Phuket really does have something for everyone. What about amenities? What should renters look for to really make that rental experience awesome?
Well, this is Phuket, right? So pools and gardens are a big deal. Imagine cooling off in your private pool after a day out or just relaxing in a lush garden.
That is the life. Phuket is all about indoor-outdoor living, right?
Hmm.
Speaking of which, the guy talks about furnished versus unfurnished places. What are the pros and cons there?
Furnished is definitely easier, especially if it's a short stay or you're coming from another country. Just move right in. But they usually cost more, and you don't get to choose the style.
Unfurnished gives you all that control over the design, and it can be cheaper. But then you got to deal with the whole furnishing thing, which can be a hassle.
True, true. Lots to think about there.
What other factors are important when looking at different places?
Parking can be a huge one, especially depending on the area. Some places in Phuket, it's a nightmare to find a spot. Having dedicated parking with your rental, huge plus.
I bet. And what about security? Always important, especially in a new place.
Absolutely. Look for things like CCTV, security guards, the secure entry systems. Those add a lot of peace of mind.
Makes sense. Safety and comfort are essential. All right, so we've talked market trends, location, budgeting tips, the different types of places you can rent those important amenities. Now, let's get into the actual process of renting a house in Phuket. This guide really highlights the importance of finding a good real estate agent. Why is that so key?
Well, a good agent can be your guide through the whole thing. They know the local market, the legal stuff. They can find places that fit what you want and what you can afford. They often know about those hidden gems you wouldn't find just browsing online.
Like having a local expert on your side. Once you've got that agent, what's next?
Viewing properties, but the guide emphasizes going beyond just, oh, this looks pretty. Really thinking practically.
Picturing yourself living there, really seeing if it fits your life right.
Exactly. Check the water pressure, see if all the appliances work, listen
Oh.
for noise, think about how much natural light there is. All those little things can make a huge difference.
Being a detective, basically. Making sure there are no surprises later on. And then comes the big moment, signing that rental agreement. The guide's really serious about reading every single clause, understanding everything before you sign. Why is that so crucial?
That's where it can get tricky, especially if you don't know the Thai legal language or customs. Honestly, having someone who speaks Thai there with you is a great idea. Make sure nothing gets lost in translation.
Always better to be safe than sorry, right? And don't be afraid to ask if something's not clear. You have the right to understand everything before you sign. Okay, so we've covered finding an agent, viewing places, and carefully checking that agreement. Now let's talk about negotiating. What tips does the guide give for getting the best deal possible?
Do your homework, compare prices for similar places, check the condition of the property, and see if any repairs need to be done. That way, you can make a good offer, show the landlord you're serious, and maybe even get a better price.
Knowledge is power, right? What else?
Don't just focus on the monthly rent. Think about other things in the lease that are important to you.
Like the length of the lease, whether you can have pets, maybe even what amenities are included.
Exactly. Maybe you get a lower rent if you sign a longer lease. Or if there's something missing that you really need, you could try negotiating a discount to cover the cost of getting it yourself.
Interesting. So think outside the box a little. And what about knowing your rights as a tenant in Phuket? What does the guide say about that?
Know your rights. It's important to understand the local laws and what protection you have. Do some research online, maybe even talk to a legal expert or a real estate agent who knows about tenant rights.
Good advice. Okay, wow, we've covered a lot in this first part of our deep dive. Market trends, things to consider, finding an agent, the actual steps of renting, but there's more. In part 2, we're going to dive into how online resources can help you find that perfect rental property in Phuket. Stay tuned.
Welcome back. What's really cool about this guide is that it doesn't just give you the practical stuff. It also talks about those little cultural things that can really make a difference when you're living somewhere new.
Right. It's like those tips you'd get from a friend who's lived there forever.
Yeah.
We talked about respecting local customs, but this guide gets specific, like what to wear at temples, how to do the way greeting, even how you position your feet.
Exactly. It's those subtle things that can really show you're trying to be respectful. And of course, there's the whole thing about comments about the royal family, a huge no-no in Thailand. Easy to forget if you're not from here.
Always good to be aware of those cultural differences. All right, let's switch gears a bit and talk about the practical stuff, setting up your life in Phuket. This guide walks through getting all your utilities and services sorted, which I imagine can feel a bit overwhelming at first.
Oh, yeah. You've just arrived in paradise, ready to explore, and then boom, logistics. But the guide breaks it down really well. Electricity, that's the provincial electricity authority. Water, usually the local water authority. Internet, well, that's a whole thing.
Because these days, internet is practically essential. Working, streaming, staying in touch with everyone back home. The guide talks about a few different internet providers in Phuket, so it sounds like it's worth comparing them.
Definitely. And don't forget about a SIM card for your phone. Way easier than racking up those roaming charges. The guide even mentions setting up cable TV or satellite if you're into that.
All those little things that make a house feel like home. All right, let's zoom out a bit and talk about the bigger picture, living in Phuket. What's the lifestyle like? The community. I'm imagining that laid-back tropical vibe, but what does the guide say?
You're pretty close. Definitely relaxed, definitely tropical, a bit slower paced than a lot of Western countries. Friendly people, a good mix of tourists and expats, and of course, respecting those local customs we talked about.
It's that combo of relaxation and cultural immersion that's so appealing. It says the local language is Thai, but that English is pretty common in tourist areas. Still, learning a few basic Thai phrases would probably go a long way.
Oh, for sure. Even just hello, thank you, excuse me. It shows you're making an effort.
Speaking of effort, let's talk about what else Phuket has to offer besides those amazing beaches. This guide really encourages exploring the cultural side of things. Any highlights that jump out?
The big Buddha statue, can't miss that. Amazing views of the whole island, seriously, you can see for miles. It's not just a religious site, it's a real architectural wonder.
I can imagine those views are breathtaking.
What else? Phuket Old Town. Really cool architecture, that Sino-Portuguese style. You can wander those streets, check out the buildings, soak up the atmosphere. And of course, the local markets. You can find everything there. Food, spices, crafts, souvenirs.
Like experiencing a whole different side of Phuket.
Yeah.
Right, away from the tourist crowds. Now, we can't talk about Thailand without talking about the food.
Right. Thai food is famous for a reason, and in Phuket, you get that southern Thai cuisine, lots of seafood, those fiery chilies.
I'm already hungry.
Oh,
The guide even mentions taking cooking classes to learn how to make all those amazing dishes.
that would be incredible. Not just for the cooking skills, but for the whole cultural experience.
Okay, time for some practical talk. Cost of living. The guide says it can be pretty affordable, but that your lifestyle really plays a role.
Right.
What are the big factors there?
If you're happy eating local food, using local transport, you can make your money go a long way. The local restaurants and street food are so good and so cheap. Taxis and those motorbike taxis are easy to find and pretty reasonable for getting around.
But if you're someone who wants fancy restaurants and, like, private cars all the time, well, obviously that's going to cost more.
Exactly. It's about finding that balance, experiencing the local way of life, but also enjoying some treats now and then.
Makes sense. What about rent specifically? We know it varies a lot, but any insight into averages?
It says rent is usually the biggest expense. And yeah, it can change a lot depending on where you are, what kind of place you want, all that. Apartments are generally the cheapest, then houses, then those villas at the top end.
So even on a budget, it sounds like you can live comfortably in Phuket.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move beyond the money stuff and talk about really making the most of your time there. Any advice from the guide on that?
It talks about building relationships with your neighbors, not just for the social side of things, but it also creates that support system when you're in a new place.
Like extending your family almost. Sharing meals, helping each other out. What other good advice does it give?
Get out and explore. Rent a scooter. It's the best way to find those hidden beaches, the local markets, those little restaurants tucked away that tourists don't always find.
I love that sense of adventure, finding those hidden gems. What else?
Community events, another great way to connect with people, learn more about the culture, maybe even give back to your new community. Phuket has a lot going on: festivals, charity events, beach cleanups, cultural performances.
It's about becoming part of the community, not just a visitor passing through.
Yeah.
Okay, before we wrap up part two, I want to leave our listeners with a little something to think about. Imagine yourself on a Phuket beach, that warm sand, the turquoise water. What sounds do you hear? The waves, kids playing, maybe some traditional Thai music. What does your perfect Phuket sound like?
Ooh, that's a good one.
All right, folks, that's it for part two of our Phuket House Rental Deep Dive. We'll be back soon with part three, where we'll explore even more insights and tips. See you then. Welcome back to the Deep Dive. As we wrap up exploring renting a house in Phuket in 2025, I gotta say, I'm already feeling like I need a vacation.
I know, right? It's been quite a journey. From market trends and finding the right spot to all those cultural things and practical tips about actually living there.
So much to think about. Speaking of practical tips, let's talk about the big move, like actually relocating to Phuket. Ocean Worldwide's guide has this whole checklist for moving abroad, which is super helpful. There's so much to figure out when you're making a big life change like that.
It can be a lot, yeah. But breaking it down into smaller steps like they do makes it way less scary.
For sure. So where do you even start? What are the most important things to tackle first?
Visas and paperwork, hands down. You have to have all the right stuff to live and work in Thailand, and those processes can take a while.
Not something you want to leave till the last minute, I bet.
Nope. Best to get organized early, gather all those documents you need, the sooner the better.
Got it. Visas and paperwork check. What else should be high on the list?
Banking and finances. Getting a Thai bank account set up just makes things so much easier. Managing your money, paying bills, even getting your salary if you work there.
Streamlines everything, right? And probably a good idea to look into how to transfer money internationally too, especially if you'd be sending money home or getting money from abroad.
Definitely. Oh, and let your bank back home know you're moving. Don't want any surprises when you try to use your cards or anything.
Those are the things you don't always think about when you're all excited about moving to paradise. The guide also really emphasizes health insurance, making sure you're covered in Thailand.
Huge one. You don't want to end up with massive medical bills if something happens. Research hospitals and clinics, understand how their healthcare system works, and make sure your insurance will actually cover you there.
Peace of mind, right? Knowing you're prepared just in case. And then there's the whole question of your stuff. Do you ship it all to Phuket or do you put it in storage? What does the guide say?
It depends. If you're moving for the long haul and have tons of stuff you want to bring, shipping might be the way to go.
But that sounds like a whole logistical thing.
Oh yeah, it's not just packing a few boxes. You gotta find a good shipping company, get quotes, figure out customs fees, make sure you understand all the import rules. It can be a lot.
Sounds intense. What if you're not sure about the long term yet? Or you only have a few things you need to bring?
Storage is a good option then. Keep everything safe back home while you figure things out in Phuket.
So many things to consider. This guide's been really helpful for all those logistical things about moving. It can feel really overwhelming, but as the guide says, just break it down into smaller steps.
Yeah.
Makes it a lot less scary.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to ask for help. There are so many resources online, those expat forums, even companies that specialize in helping people relocate. You don't have to do it all alone.
True. Okay, so we've covered the practical side of moving to Phuket, visas, banking, all that. But before we wrap up our deep dive, I want to come back to those cultural things we talked about. What are the biggest things our listeners should remember as they start their Phuket adventure?
Respect for the local customs and traditions is huge. Remember, dress appropriately at temples. Use the way greeting. Be mindful of where you put your feet. It shows you're trying to understand and respect their culture.
It's about being a good guest.
Exactly. And like we said before, be careful about talking about the royal family. Thailand has strict laws about that, and it's best to just avoid it altogether.
Be respectful, be sensitive, be aware. Good advice. Okay, let's switch gears one last time. Setting up utilities and services once you're in your new place. The guide walks through all that, which can seem like a headache, but it sounds like it's not too bad once you know what to do.
Yeah, for electricity, you contact the provincial electricity authority. For water, it's usually the local water authority.
Sure.
Have your rental agreement and your passport ready when you contact them.
Makes sense? What about internet? Probably top of the list for most people these days.
Oh, yeah. Do your research, compare different providers, see what packages they have, what speeds they offer. Coverage can be different depending on where you are, so it's worth looking into that.
And getting a local SIM card for your phone.
Huge time saver and money saver.
Okay, we have covered so much in this deep dive. The Phuket rental market, actually moving there, all the cultural stuff, the excitement of a new adventure. Any last words of wisdom or inspiration for people thinking about making Phuket their home?
Embrace it. Phuket is amazing, so beautiful, so much culture, and the people are so welcoming. It's truly special.
I love that. It sounds like a place that really gets under your skin.
It is. Remember, renting a house in Phuket, it's more than just finding a place to stay. It's a whole new way of life, immersing yourself in a new culture, making memories you'll never forget.
So true. So to all our listeners dreaming of Phuket, we say go for it. Pack your sense of adventure, be open to new experiences, and embrace the unexpected. Phuket is waiting for you.
Don't forget your swimsuit.
And sunscreen. And that, my friends, wraps up our deep dive into Phuket house rentals for 2025. We hope you've learned a lot, felt inspired, and maybe even started planning your own adventure. Until next time, keep exploring, keep dreaming, and keep diving deep.